I'm sure you're as excited as I am about Microsoft 365 Copilot. You might be preparing as a leader, either technically for your organization or even individually, in terms of how can you make sure that these initial pilot experiences around this new AI technology are successful. The first one is a pretty easy category, which is the technical preparedness. Easy in understanding, but maybe a little bit more work in preparing. When you use Microsoft 365 Copilot, it's going to use Microsoft 365 apps. So it's really critical that Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, Microsoft Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint, and Exchange are ready in your organization. It's also important to note that the experience is always better with the more modern version of those tools. So if you're expecting to use Copilot for SharePoint, it's critical that you understand you need to use modern SharePoint, not classic SharePoint. And if you're using it for something like Outlook, you want to make sure that you're using the Outlook for Windows transition. So essentially the new Outlook for Windows experience, which is more seamless. And it's also nicely embedded with the Windows Copilot experience if that's also what you're rolling out around the same time. The same discussion, we also need to make sure supporting services like OneDrive are enabled and available. Copilot actually uses OneDrive in a few different circumstances, and it's really helpful for sharing files within Microsoft 365 Copilot that you might generate or things that you might prepare and work on as an interim pathway. So please make sure you have OneDrive enabled and supported by those users that you're going to be piloting this with. The other big one is Microsoft Loop. Now, I know some organizations haven't necessarily rolled out Microsoft Loop and prepared their organizations for it, but it is a really great thing to roll out alongside Microsoft Copilot if you don't already have it. There's a lot of reasons why Copilot works really well with Loop, but especially because Loop works across those other systems and gives your Copilot an experience that can actually flow between apps. There's some really big benefits there. Another big thing to prepare for is licensing. On the technical level, we need to make sure we understand who are going to be those initial cohorts of pilot users to be licensed. I would encourage you to look at those who are highly active in collaboration. Think of people who have high digital debt. Those are people that we want to start with because often we have more significant ROI. They have a real need to think and work differently in a more digitally effective way, more digital fitness. And so those are great people to learn from. And it'll be easier as we roll it out to a broader audience because those are the same people most people go to because we all learn from peers to ask those questions. Now, the last area for technical readiness, aside from like update channels and things like that, is security and privacy review. And that is, I think, the hardest area of this, not because it's difficult to understand. The way Copilot works is if I want to generate a document, say a proposal document from some meeting notes or a proposal document from another product spec sheet, if I can't find or access that product spec sheet because I don't have access to it, then I don't have to worry. It only works for the content I have access to. So if you're not a member of a site or if there's a particular subset of content within that site via a variety of different ways in which it can be protected from you, you would not be able to see or use it within Copilot in the same way you wouldn't be able to see it in search or other experiences like that. Now, the other side to this is we might have content that we protect. We might use algorithmic policies via Microsoft Purview to automatically protect content that has specific conditions in it. So think of that stuff that might be PII or something like that, where we apply a highly confidential label to it and then apply a bunch of rules around that content. The good news here is when you create content with Purview, if it pulls some of that PII content or other things into this new document that you're generating with it, or say a summary, then it will automatically protect it under the same Purview rules. So the truth is, if you just prepare your organization for Purview and use it effectively, you will find that, generally speaking, there's no scenarios in Copilot that will surprise you because they will be protected as people keep the Copilot generation of content and save. The protections will be applied automatically. So those are the technical preparedness steps. Let's talk about the business preparing and leaders preparing. On the business side, it's really important to understand that Copilot is one of those experiences that is best learned with peers. We learn with one another. How are you prompting? How are you using it? And the way it affects collaboration is quite pronounced. In this way, it's really critical that you already have existing or effective champion programs, and you've learned how to run communities to improve digital excellence and digital fitness. It's not about just doing training for Copilot, although that can be helpful. It's about making sure that you have an ecosystem in your organization that can support this kind of change, because it is a change that requires management and proactive support. It's important to acknowledge people don't learn from managers in IT, they learn from peers. And so we want to make sure that this network, this community, this champion program that you develop is going to be prepared and it's more effective for the Copilot experience that you're going to roll out. Now, the other big one is you need to make sure leaders are aware of what responsible AI looks like. You have policies in place for your corporation. And importantly, you have some key guiding principles and key communication support for leaders. Because leaders are going to be asked questions like, how come these people have access to Copilot and I don't? Or they're going to get questions like, is this safe to use? What are the risks with it? I've heard X. Is this true with Copilot? And so this is a really important part of this process. And to do this, you often just start with a corporate policy around AI. Well, many of you may already have this. If you don't, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to share some samples. And you essentially have policies like, you cannot use consumer AI tools on your corporate managed devices and so on and so forth. And then you have a guiding principle. Your principle might be something like this. AI in our organization, this is a commitment, right? AI in our organization is going to be available to all people in our organization because we see it as a competitive advantage and we want all people to have equal access to competitive advantages. So we want everyone to have access to effective AI tools in our organization. Today, we are starting with a subset of people to learn, to improve how we roll out these technologies, and we're targeting those people based on these criteria. Maybe it is people who have high digital debt and they need that effective support. Maybe it's people that are part of our champions network and community. Again, you decide what the right framework of that is, but you need to have both those answers because when people ask, you want to be able to provide them confidence there is a pathway forward for them. This also reduces shadow IT, the misuse of other AI technologies, which can cause really big problems within a business today, and of course, creates a better understanding of how to address key questions around responsible AI. I hope this has helped you prepare for Microsoft Copilot, and I hope you yourself are going to be using Microsoft 365 Copilot in the coming months because it really is an amazing product, amazing capability, and it really does change how we work. Thanks so much for your time.